Coming up, the love between a son and his dad in the face of a devastating disease. Meet the man who describes his family's journey through Alzheimer's as a love story. Good morning, I'm Alexis Del Cid. Welcome to a special edition of All Things Heart. Every day this week, we're bringing you a different story of love in honor of Valentine's Day week. Some are romantic love, others are about the love between friends, family, community, and in this case, it's a father and his son. And of course, my buddy Jessica Lovell hasn't gone anywhere. She's watching for your viewer questions. So we'll get to Jessica with the viewer questions a little bit later in the program. Today we're celebrating the love between a father and son, and this son is devoted to caring for his dad who has Alzheimer's disease. It didn't take long, though, into his journey to realize that caregivers need to care for themselves as well.
Good morning, sunshine.
My name's Carlos. Charlie Robot.
Charlie! Hey there. Say hi to your fans.
The love and awe that Carlos Olivas III feels for his father is ever present.
We need to get you up so we can get a donut. He's that special kind of guy that I call Dad, my hero. His laughter, his humor, his ability to spark a room full of laughter that brings joy and love to the community.
His dad, Carlos Olivas Jr., is a proud U.S. Navy vet, the rock of the family, and a gifted artist. He's also living with Alzheimer's disease.
I have memories of him telling me that, oh, I had this as a dream and this is what I'm going to do. And he would do it. He would create things that he would see in his mind overnight.
What is it? Art.
Art has become one of the love languages Carlos and his dad share together.
Where'd it come from? My brain, it just peeked out.
This is some of his artwork that comes out of his brain. You know, his mind just wanders and he just processes what he feels at that moment.
Like the millions of others traveling the Alzheimer's road, Carlos knew very little about the disease until one day in 2015 when he got a call from his dad's dentist.
It was a shock when someone says, you are the emergency contact for your dad, and we want to have a conversation with you about his health.
They had noticed a decline in his dad's oral hygiene, a very common symptom when someone is in cognitive decline.
It was enough for them to raise the flag, to give me a call and say, you need to know this.
Shortly after, his dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And roughly a year later, Carlos quit his job in Southern California to move back to his childhood home in Sacramento to care for his father. He was not expecting the isolation that can tear apart families who are navigating an Alzheimer's diagnosis.
The challenges created more isolation between our immediate family.
At a certain point, Carlos realized he couldn't be an effective caregiver without caring for himself. He began joining support groups. Along the way, he also signed up for something called CareText.
Well, CareText was a study that included caregivers.
During the trial, Carlos received a text a day giving information on various aspects of caregiving and Alzheimer's disease. He could select certain prompts, guiding him to more information and resources.
It was like someone thinking about me at that time when I'm having a difficult time.
He says the support and guidance at his fingertips was invaluable. And today, Carlos is a man on a mission.
It's okay to feel like the walls are crushing in on you, but there is help out there.
He wants to reach as many people as possible and make help accessible to them.
There's not enough men out there that are out there promoting and spreading awareness of Alzheimer's and related dementia. First time I went into a caregiver support group, no one looked like me, but at the end of the day, I felt so comfortable to be able to be vulnerable.
And through that support, Carlos has discovered an unexpected way to find beauty and joy.
Joy is being taught by my dad how to care for him. Joy is love.
Carlos, we are so happy to be joined by you this morning from your home in California, and thanks for waking up so early. You are 2 hours ahead of time.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and good morning from California.
And your dad's still asleep. He gets to sleep in.
Yes, he's sleeping in.
Until the donuts. Here in the studio, we have Dr. Jeff Burns. Dr. Burns is an Alzheimer's and memory care expert, as well as the co-director of the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And we're also joined by Michelle Needens. Michelle is a licensed clinical social worker, and Michelle is also the director of the Cognitive Care Network. The Cognitive Care Network is incredible. It's an initiative that connects primary care doctors with Alzheimer's resources, especially in places where there are not enough specialists. And full disclosure, Michelle is also our family's Alzheimer's disease counselor, who has just been an angel. I know we've talked about this before, and Dr. Burns, before we placed my dad in memory care, you and your team were treating him for his Alzheimer's. Right out of the gate, Carlos, I feel such a bond with you. The way you share your journey with your father is so gentle, and what is so powerful is you say your relationship with your dad has continued to deepen as this disease has progressed. How would you explain that to someone who's at the beginning of this journey, really in the weeds, who can't even see how that's possible?
Great question. I get that asked a lot, and it's hard to convey. It's hard to convey this journey and how I approach this path. At the beginning, I butted heads with my dad, and it was difficult to kind of get into a rhythm. It wasn't until I became coached from a caregiver coach and started understanding what I needed to take care of for me, the self-care routines, the appropriate steps to get me in a position so I can become a better caregiver for my dad. And that was kind of understanding where my dad was at. Where was he in his progression, and finding tools that he had in his own tool belt to help me care for him. So I just needed to listen and understand what he needed and how to care with his needs.
So often, I know you've probably heard this, the counselors, and Michelle has guided us to as well. They say meet you where your dad is. You know, wherever he is that day, that's where you meet him, whatever decade he's in, whatever time period he's in. You say, Carlos, that your dad is still teaching you now. What has your dad taught you just over the past few years since you've been caring for him?
Just to be myself, to be that son that is there for him in that moment, through laughter, joy, art, just the beauty of the human spirit, and having these connections that we've always had throughout our life. It's just connecting, just being present through that love.
I want to tell our viewers at home, you're also going to be seeing some amazing footage from an upcoming PBS series that features Carlos and his dad. The series is called Caregiving, and you can watch the entire video on wellbeings.org. There are undoubtedly so many people watching this program who are affected by Alzheimer's disease. Listen to these numbers. Roughly 11 million people in America are Alzheimer's caregivers. 11 million. According to the Alzheimer's Association, 30% of Alzheimer's caregivers are 65 or older, 2/3 are women, and approximately 1 in 4 caregivers are described as sandwich generation caregivers, meaning they're sandwiched between caring for their parents and caring for their own children. Boy, a lot of people can relate to that. Carlos, sandwich generation is so hard. The journey's rough no matter what. You post about your dad and being a caregiver on Instagram. What motivated you to start sharing this journey publicly?
The motivation came from wanting to share my dad's artwork. I shared it with another person living with Alzheimer's from the UK on a conference call, and he said, get your dad onto social media. And that was the driving force to put me in a position to start sharing our journey and sharing my dad's artwork. The man draws 6 to 10 hours a day as part of his daily routine. And to me, that is amazing. It's dad. It is who my dad is.
Your dad is such a talented artist, and I love how he says it's just whatever comes out of his brain. And I love that you're letting us get to know your dad, because we wouldn't have gotten to know him if you hadn't have taken this journey publicly, and you're really helping pull away that veil of privacy and isolation that so many of us feel when we first embark on this journey. And I want to bring in Dr. Burns and Michelle to this discussion because, Dr. Burns, I'll start with you. There are stages of Alzheimer's disease, and I remember when my dad was first diagnosed in another city, I went down this obsessive rabbit hole trying to figure out what stage he was in, when he was going to get into the next stage, and what everything looked like. So when you talk about care plans for families and caregivers, it is important to have a care plan, but how do you figure that out based on what stage they're in?
Yeah, well, I mean, the stage matters in terms of, as you're pointing out, how much care somebody needs. You know, in the mild stages, people are still able to do a lot of their activities of daily living, but they're beginning to have problems doing things like the finances and driving and maybe cooking. And so we have to think about, you know, how do we support that and how do we coach caregivers to support that. And in the moderate stages, we start seeing, you know, more problems and needing a lot more assistance with things, you know, more basic than cooking and driving and finances and things like that.
Sure.
Then in the severe stages, somebody needs full-time help for pretty much everything that they do throughout the day. So we have to think about those different needs and target those needs for, you know, what stage somebody's in.
Michelle, what's been incredible to just witness and go through is the attention that you give to each family, you and your team, as social workers, as well as everything else you do. I mean, my mom will call me and say, I just got off the phone with Michelle and we were on for 45 minutes. And I think, my gosh, how does this woman have the time to do that? One of the things that you helped with and that you continue to help with is how to help caregivers make peace with also caring for themselves. What is the biggest obstacle that you always witness when you're trying to get that point across to caregivers?
I think it's that they're asking the wrong question. And the question is that most caregivers have to process is, what is the best thing to do for this person? That is the wrong question. The question really is, how are we going to learn together? How are we going to continue to find connections? How are we going to make sure that nobody gets left behind, including the caregiver? That it's not a person disease, it is a family experience. You know, so I always say, here is the cognitive changes, here is the emotional changes. And we spend all our time here. Mm-hmm. And we need to spend most our time here.
Right.
Shifting. You know, Carlos said, and I just love it, about your relationship deepen. That's just profound to me, and I think that's the right perspective. But I think it's a journey to go from loss and grief, and I don't want life to look like this, to acceptance and peace, and yes, there are some moments of joy. And yes, relationships deepen, so we lose the experience of wider. We only go deeper.
Right.
So we've got to shut down the idea that we widen, we just go deeper.
It's like you're tunneling into another dimension.
Yes.
With your loved one. Carlos, was there a tipping point when you realized that, man, I got to prioritize self-care? Was there a moment?
Yeah, there was a moment. I became frustrated, depressed, angry. I was battling my emotions, and I needed help. I needed to change the approach that I had with my dad. We were not having a good relationship. Our, our living situation was getting tense. We were butt heads that, and literally it really pulled at my heart. It was tough for me. And that's when I reached out to the Alzheimer's Association for help to get into a workshop and end up in a caregiver support group. And that took some time for me to accept, to me to understand that that's what I needed. Mm-hmm. And once I became a caregiver support member, that's when I felt I was home. Like that's where I needed to be.
Isn't it amazing to meet other people that just get it? No one else gets
it's hard.
it. They feel bad, but they don't get it until you get into those groups.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to overcome those obstacles, right, to understand what you need internally and to process it out. I felt very comfortable talking about our journey to these people who understand the hardships.
Right. Michelle, how common is it for caregivers to start manifesting physical symptoms and getting sick themselves?
Oh, very, very common. Very, very common. And as Carlos indicates, usually first stage is falling into depression. Mm-hmm. And then we begin to see some of those physical changes emerge. And then we see ignoring the physical changes. And then people get into crisis zone.
Right.
Because really it's an identity shift for care partners as well as the person with the disease. Because the identity piece is, I can handle this, I can do it, I owe it, they would do this for me. All these, and these are not solid identity pieces. These are fragile, paper thin identity pieces that have to fall by the wayside.
And truly, the loved one who's battling the disease would never want you to get sick over them.
No.
I can promise you that. No one who, if the person who has the disease had a crystal ball and could have seen this, I'm really convinced they would have told all of us to take care of ourselves. They wouldn't have wanted this.
Oh, in early stage, for the person diagnosed, their biggest fear, one of the top fears is they are going to be a burden to their family. So you are darn right. There's nobody out there. Or let's say it would be extremely rare,
right,
that a person with disease would choose for them to have their family in peril.
So you're honoring your loved one. I always think of it this way. You're honoring your loved one by taking care of yourself. You're honoring their wishes. And I just wanted to share that. And I know, Carlos, you and I have talked about that as well. If you have a question at home, it can be any question at all, send it to us on YouTube, Facebook, or the All Things Heart email. You will find the links on how to connect with us in real time right there on your screen. Ask anything. We're going to talk about something real tough right now. One of the toughest decisions a family can make is when to place their loved one in memory care, which is often shrouded in so many complicated feelings of guilt or like you're letting them down. Dr. Burns, at the beginning of these stages of the diagnosis, do you talk about that stage with loved ones?
Yeah, I mean, yes. But it's not a huge focus until, but I think it's important. The way we talk about it is we say we need to be thinking ahead. We need to be thinking about, options, and it might be a year from now, it might be 5 years from now, but at some point it's, likely almost certain that you're going to need more help to care for your loved one. And so think ahead. Think about what your options are. What you don't want to do is have a crisis, somebody go in the hospital and have to be placed somewhere.
Right.
So don't let a crisis drive it. Do your thinking now and learn about all the variables that go into making that decision. And you're not making it today, but you're more prepared in the future. And then I turn it over to experts like Michelle.
Michelle, one of the things you told my mom is don't wait until it's needed. You have got to look ahead as badly as you don't want to do this. You told her you've got to have a plan, because if you wait till one of you breaks a hip, it's too late.
Yeah, and part of that is, I call it the worry list. That even early on in the disease, both the person and the families have worries that play out in their head. Am I going to be able to handle this? How am I going to handle this? Do I have enough money? What is this going to look like? Are they going to end up in some terrible place that they have conjured in their mind? You know, all of those things. And in some cases, am I going to die first and leave this person? You know, how am I going to handle my own health problems? So I say tackle the worry list. It's not about checking off a box of planning. It is that your mind circles over and over through these problems until you have a plan. And the plan is your escape door. So again, cognitive issues, emotional issues. We need the escape hatch from the circular worries that go on in our heads. So whether we ever need placement, there are people that make the distance at home. There are people that die before they get to the most severe stage. That, you know, this happens in lots of different ways, but we need the plan, we need the contingency so that our mind does not get stuck. Because the minute it gets stuck, we are lost in grief, we are lost in depression, we are lost in guilt. I can't do, because our mind starts saying, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it one more day, I can't do it. And you just get lost and immobilized in that process.
Carlos, you didn't have a Michelle when you were going through this. I feel like everyone needs a Michelle in their pocket. So how did you plan for the stages of care that your dad may need? How do you plan?
God. I think Michelle just talked about me.
Right.
The worry list, the grief, the emotions that I get stuck in, the rumination in my head over and over again. We go through these challenges, and sometimes it could be daily. Sometimes I won't think about it for 6 months. But it's true. It's hard to understand what the plan is. Where am I going? What's next? Because it's uncertain. It's something you cannot predict. And at the snap of a finger, or even the brain just giving out, my dad could change at any moment. He could fall down, break a hip. And what's next? What's my plan? And I've gone through that list over and over again, trying to understand how to prepare myself. And I don't think I can be prepared enough, but I do have a plan. I do have medical advance directives. I have a PULSE, which is a physician-ordered life-sustaining treatment. I think that's correct. But I've had to learn how to proceed. I've had to go through a coaching, consulting, and how to understand the steps. You know, what's the difference between a nursing home and a skilled nursing facility? You know, they might sound the same, but they're two different
Totally
types
different.
of facilities. What's the next plan? How do I care for my dad? How do I make him feel comfortable and walk him home? Those are challenges that I have to understand and learn about. And having somebody as part of the care team is something that's important for me to take on and to accept, and to surround myself with these resources to help me plan for the future.
Everything you're saying is going to resonate with so many viewers who are watching. And excuse me for getting a little emotional, but Carlos, you're hitting the nail on the head. I do have a question for you, Carlos. You talked about there are days or weeks when you don't think about it. Do you feel guilty when you don't think about it? Because sometimes I'll have a great day and then I'll be going to bed and I'll think, oh my God, I didn't think about my dad. And it's like a jolt.
Yeah, your guilt comes, it comes in different ways. It's like I didn't do something for my dad that day, or I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I feel that he's not happy because of the activities or the environment that he's in. And it's hard. It's hard to process that out and understand what I'm going through and how to release that. How do I surrender? How do I surrender to this journey and make me feel comfortable enough and confident to keep on down this path, to feel confident enough to be loving, to be that son, that family member that's caring for my dad, my hero.
Your dad would tell you he is so proud of you. Anytime you're hard on yourself, anyone watching this program, not even knowing your dad, would tell you your dad would put his arm around you and say he's so proud of you. Your true and complete dad, pre-diagnosis, would be so proud of you. Michelle, for people who are new to caregiving, where do they even start when it comes to finding a network? I just started Googling Alzheimer's support for 40-somethings, Alzheimer's support for, what do people do if they don't?
I think it's just asking some of the right questions. There's not enough supports, but there are supports for everyone. I mean, Carlos talked about the Alzheimer's Association. There is a 24-hour helpline there. Every state has caregiver support groups, and that comes from area agencies. It comes from, for example, here at KU, we have a set of support groups. The association has support groups. The Alzheimer's Foundation has support groups. There are other groups that have support groups. So I think that's often the place to start. There are areas where there are more services and less, but if you can find yourself to a support group, the bravest people go to support groups. The people that say, I'm going to face this. Support groups aren't for those who are just saying I'm giving up and I need to find people to commiserate with. That's not who attends support groups. People that attend support groups are saying, I'm trying to figure out my way. So you can learn from another caregiver. They can say, hey, I tried this, I had this resource. So, the first place is, as a caregiver, is really finding yourself in that support group. And not to block yourself by saying it's too early, or
right.
I'm doing fine, because again, it's not about fine, it's about power. And if we want to assume our power, we have got to find people in the world that know where to go and some directions to try.
Such a great way to put it. Dr. Burns, we know that clinical trials are crucial, and you are doing some incredible research and trials with your team. Are there any clinical trials for caregivers that people watching can get involved with, and how do they even get involved with a clinical trial?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay.
We have trials. We're trying to understand more about caregivers and what more can we do. We met Carlos through our Caretaking program. We're looking to expand that in the next few weeks and really grow that through Dr. Jaime Perales, who you've had on the show. So that's growing. But yeah, it's a family disease, so we don't just enroll people who have Alzheimer's into Alzheimer's trials. We're also have dedicated studies focused on caregivers and how do we help them and how do we understand their needs better. So, but the biggest thing is if you can find someone like Michelle and her team, a cognitive care network specialists or navigators, that's and go to support groups. Michelle started and her team have started about 20 support groups here all around Kansas City. So that's so important to get involved in that. If you want to find out about our trials, you can go to our website, look us up, KU and Alzheimer's, just Google that, or
Right.
kualzheimers.org will get you to our website, and or call us.
We have some questions coming in. I want to go to Jessica Lovell in Studio B with our viewer questions.
Alexa, such a great conversation this morning. And you know what? I don't have any questions, but I have a couple of comments that I do want to share with you and your guests today. Vera says, thank you, thank you, thank you. She says, we are in the very early stages, and I do really appreciate you sharing and giving us hope. Thank you. So I wanted to let you know that. And then Jeremy, who is a very faithful viewer of the Morning Medical Update and your show, is sharing a really personal story with us this morning. He says he just lost his mother last week to Alzheimer's and dementia. And he wanted to say, great job, Alexis, with the work that you have done with your dad. It definitely takes adaptability and resilience. What works one day doesn't necessarily work the next, and you can feel like you're starting all over again. And it's difficult to understand if you're not experiencing it firsthand. But a great quote that I heard was, err if you must on the side of love. We're pretty good about second guessing how good we're doing at it, but if you're acting to help out of love and sincerity, you couldn't ask for more. I wanted to share that with you this morning.
Wow. So Vera and Jeremy, thank you so much. And Vera, I'm sorry you're on this journey. Jeremy, I'm so sorry for your loss. But what an incredible message that you've shared. This is amazing. We could go on. Well, I could keep you guys here all day, but you have important work to do, and Carlos needs to take care of his dad. So for some final thoughts, I want to start with Dr. Burns. What's the one thing you want people watching to know?
Well, I'll thank Carlos for speaking out and advocating, and then really highlighting the positive that we can see. I don't follow you on social media, but I'm going to start.
Oh, you should. It's incredible, and his dad's amazing.
So thanks for all you do, and thanks for. It looks like your posts are beautiful and really highlight the positive. And so, there are, and as Michelle said, there are things we can, focus on that are positive, and there's joy. And I think in the Alzheimer's, we're not talking really about the research, but in the Alzheimer's field, we really are at a big moment in sort of the history of our field. We have new diagnostics, we have new treatments, and we're just getting started. And so, we're working hard to how do we use those things better. But we can't forget about this is a family disease, and we have to do more for caregivers. And so we have spent years, almost a decade, growing our program and in that direction of how do we do more for caregivers. And no one's prepared for this, and no one feels like they're doing a great job, and despite the fact that they are, right. And we need to help them along the way. So we're focused on all those things.
Thank you for all the work that you do. Michelle, what would be your message to viewers?
Look for what's right. Know you can do it. Know that focusing on the day is the only thing that matters. That is the green zone. That's the gold mine.
Thank you, Michelle. Carlos, first of all, thank you, Carlos, for everything you're doing. What would you like our viewers to know?
First of all, I would say you're not alone. Michelle and Dr. Burns and the many other people out there are there to help. They are there to support you as a caregiver, as a care partner in this journey. It's hard, it's difficult, but with a team, you become a champion. And I'm trying to champion my caregiver journey. I resonate with everything that these individuals have said because it's very supportive. It's accepting the journey as it is. Every day, it's a new day. I take it on with love, and it's hard to kind of understand where I was at, but I'm grateful for the journey and the steps I've taken to become better. It's taken a lot of work, but I have a team behind me, and that team encourages me to continue onward. You cannot do this alone. One of my wise caregiver support members has drilled that into me. You cannot do this alone. having a plan, having some type of understanding what's next. It takes a lot of effort to be where I'm at right now. I'm comfortable, I'm familiar, but tomorrow is uncertain. As long as I can hold on to the love that I have right now, and that's a good day.
And that's what you mean when you talk about it being a love story. Carlos, thank you so much for your vulnerability and for sharing your wisdom with everyone who's going to see this program. And thank you so much for joining the conversation today. To our viewers, if you would like to watch or share one of our previous episodes, all you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen right now. It'll take you to links of all of our past episodes. And that same link will take you to a heart health quiz to learn your risks about having any heart problems as we continue our week of all things heart. We'll be back tomorrow for the second installment of our Week of Love. These little dolls are turning 30 years old. Shadow Buddies have given decades of love and learning to thousands of children and frontline workers. I'm Alexis Del Cid on the next All Things Heart. Our week of Valentine love continues with a family story that inspired this mother and son to give back. Tuesday at 8 a.m.